My guest today on the Neil Wilkins podcast is Emily Aborn. Now, Emily is a content copywriter, a speaker, and podcast host. She's collaborated with thousands of individuals in over 100 industries as a copywriter. She knows a thing or two about content and brings personality, creativity, and messages to life, guiding others to build community and relationship-based businesses. So in this conversation, we, I hope, are going to explore how to increase content visibility. Welcome to the podcast, Emily.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Neil. I'm very excited to dive into this topic with you.
Yeah, this is a really key topic, isn't it? And I think for a lot of people, visibility doesn't necessarily mean what we think it does. Do you want to explain?
So I think when we imagine visibility, we think of being seen, right? So let me just frame this a little bit. Where I live in New Hampshire, visibility literally means what I can see out my car window in like the middle of a snowstorm. Like if we say something has low visibility, you can't see where you're going on the road. And I think that we need to backtrack with that word a little bit as business owners and as marketers and say, okay, is visibility just about people seeing me? Or is it also about me seeing other people, the people that I'm talking to, and also where I'm going? So I kind of look at it as like, it's not just getting your message out there to more people and getting more eyeballs to you. It's also being able to really see others, like your ideal clients, your ideal listeners, and also see where you're going and where you're taking them. So it's like think of it as like a very clear picture when we use the word visibility. And I like that because it sets us up. It's like the foundation for what we do next.
It really truly is, isn't it? And it kind of puts a whole different definition around that word content as well, doesn't it? Because I think a lot of people listening to this will have fallen, much as I guess you and I maybe back in the day did as well, fallen into the trap of if I publish it out there, they will come. If I put it out there, they'll understand. If I do this, my business is going to be successful. And then we sit there and the tumbleweed rolls past. Nobody listens, nobody engages, nobody acts, nobody likes, nobody shares. Nothing happens. This is where so many people are. I was talking to somebody this morning, somebody I'm supporting on a particular education program they're on, and they said, oh, we typically just get one like or one person with everything we put out. And we're a big brand. What are we doing wrong? And I thought, well, I'm talking to Emily this afternoon, so maybe I'll have an answer for you later. And we were kind of debating this whole thing about it's not just about the publishing, is it? There's so many more little nuances behind getting this right. Where should somebody start if they've fallen into that hole, would you say?
So first off, I want to validate that it is really frustrating when you put your hard work and attention on something and it only gets one like, or nobody is engaging with it at all. That's really, really frustrating. And I will say some of it is not our fault at all because the algorithms are very touchy these days, right? So it is harder than ever to get your content out into the world. Where I say every single person needs to start is exactly how you and I started our conversation. Who is this for? And when you answer that question, I would even say like every piece of content you create, have in your mind one of your ideal clients, not six different avatars in your mind, just one type of person that you are speaking to at one time. And when you take that approach, you're basically speaking their language a little bit more clearly. So instead of now making a post or content that is just so clearly for everyone, right? It's like generic and ChatGPT could have done it. We're now speaking a little bit more to one person. And so some of that comes with understanding who that person is, understanding what their likes are, what their dislikes are, what drives them, what keeps them up at night, what they really care about when it comes to your product or service. You kind of have to like dig a little bit deep. And that's why I start visibility with seeing the other person. I need to see clearly who I'm actually talking to in order to talk. Otherwise, I may as well just be talking to a wall, right? And sharing content with my wall. So that's where I think is really key to start. And then I think taking it back another step further, I just keep when I'm creating content, I just try to keep it so super simple. Like every single piece, it speaks to one person and one issue. And I give it one goal. Like sometimes the goal is that I want them to just be entertained and laugh. Sometimes I want it to be really relatable and personal. Sometimes I want it to be actionable. So I want them to actually take an action, whether that action is implementing it for themselves or working with me, right? So give your content one singular goal, talk to one person at a time, and it already starts to transform. It already becomes like a little bit more, I'm going to say, like tangible rather than just kind of like, well, it's a little vague and, generic. Anybody could have created that.
So somebody listening then to this says, okay, Emily, I get it, but yeah, my boss is pushing me to, talk to this persona and this persona and this persona, and we've got to hit our numbers this month, and we've got to be driving, traffic to the website or our e-commerce store. And so I can't afford the luxury of just talking to one person and being really specific. I need to talk to everybody. They've already sort of fallen back into the hole and back into the trap, haven't they? But how would you kind of answer that as a challenge? Because that is the commercial reality, at least perceived, I think, by a lot of businesses, isn't it?
Yeah. So let's say that is the case. And in that case, I would kind of get a little more like, I don't really recommend one platform over another. And I'm not like an Instagram expert or a LinkedIn expert or an email marketing expert. I would say that's going to be your opportunity to use different formats of your content, speaking to different people. So, and you could even use literally the same topic. Let's just say I'm not a tech writer. I actually have a tech writer, but let's just say you're doing an information, like a call for cybersecurity. Okay. So you can try one piece focused to individual business owners in your email marketing. You could try something to healthcare, the healthcare industry on your LinkedIn article. You could try, something a little bit more tailored to agencies on Instagram. So you can actually take the same exact topic. You could even take the same exact message and just like put it in those people's context on different platforms. So I would say experiment, and it is experiment. I mean, we have to try things to see what works and what doesn't work, especially if you're coming from the bottom and you're trying to work yourself to where you're getting leads and you're getting traffic and you're getting more eyeballs, right? Like if you're at the bottom, don't expect it to go to 1,000 overnight. So I would say like see where those people are showing up, and sometimes that might need to be tweaked. I'll give you a very personal example. I'm just me. I'm a solopreneur, so I get to have a little bit more fun and creativity, I'll say, with my content. I love on Instagram, for example, seeing, are people more interested in personal reels when I do something like, I have a classic one I do every year, which is how many layers you need to put on to go for a walk in the winter in New Hampshire. And I will just do like this time lapse where I'm putting on all these layers, and then I put that as a reel. My educational reels, when I'm actually giving people like a tip or a piece of knowledge or advice, those don't do as well as my entertaining ones. So for me, I stick to the carousels for like when I want to educate, and I'll use reels for when I just am being silly or funny. So you kind of have to see like what format, and I mean, we could go on and on about the different platforms and the different formats that every single one offers. But you kind of have to test and see like, who am I talking to on this, in this format? Who am I talking to in this one? And that could be sort of your wiggle room within there.
So what it is what you're saying then, Emily, the whole idea being that it's almost like you have to spend at least as much time planning and thinking about this stuff than actually writing. Because I think a lot of people, when they think about content creation, they go straight for the content, they go straight for the outcome, rather than actually stopping and thinking, actually, if I spend some quality time planning who I'm writing for, truly doing the research and listening, maybe watching for what they're
Mm.
engaging with right now, and getting really into their mindset, and all of that, plus all of this kind of channel planning as well, comes before I even start to put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard. It kind of feels like there's a lot of stuff upstream that people might be missing out on. Am I kind of hearing this right?
Yeah, and I don't want you to think of planning or strategizing taking all day. It can be so super simple, rinse and repeat once you get it how you want it. So I'm going to give you another like kind of high level example. So what I do in my business is I'll take a quarter, January, February, March, and I'll put a theme for each month of the quarter. So like February is going to be loving your customers. March is going to be brand voice. January, I think it was like planning and strategy. So I'll give each and every single month a job, right? And then I put my content buckets under that. And when I say buckets, I like to just keep this so easy. It's just foundational, the who, what, why, where, when of your company, like all the stuff people need to know about who you are and what you do. Educational, that's like your tips and helpful information and resources and tools, things that your ideal customer is interested in. It's not always a call to action. It could just be literally helping somebody out. Like you and I right now are creating educational content for people. And then you have like the relatable stuff, which is like the conversational, personal. It depends on, if you're a large corporation, it's going to look different than if you're a small business owner. Like I can get away posting a cute photo of my dog. Probably a corporation. I mean, maybe they could if they bring their dogs to work, right? And then the last one is that promotional piece, that call to action. So I will literally take all 4 of those categories in a month and say, what am I creating this month that has to do in that focuses in this category, and then I just kind of disperse it from there in knowing what I create every month for content. Like I know I have 4 newsletters, I have 4 podcasts, right, et cetera, et cetera. So once I get that, it's actually very easy and it's very rinse and repeat. It's not like I'm reinventing the wheel all the time. I use topics over and over and over again. I turn them around in different ways. Like it should not be, I don't want planning to take over your life. I'll say that. But I do think that having a solid starting point of who I'm actually talking to is vital, and I see it overlooked so many times, and that is just like where people begin to go wrong.
I love that kind of, it's a really pragmatic approach, isn't it? For those planful amongst us, we can almost get, what's it called? Planning paralysis, I think
Oh
it's called,
yeah.
isn't it? Where you just go on and on and on. You think, oh, there's a week gone and I haven't actually created anything. And so there is that issue. But it is about balancing it, isn't it? And getting just enough to be able to confidently have something to measure against, or to know what your key performance indicators would, could, should be. And then you've at least got a structure, haven't you? And I love that idea of the content buckets, because as you say, they're so reusable, and I'm guessing you could almost then return same time next year and compare
Exactly.
back to what's happened last year, and then you can see the improvement. Is it that kind of simple, really?
It's that simple. Yeah, yeah. And don't even hesitate to try the exact same piece of content in a different way. So if something didn't land as a podcast or as an email newsletter, try it as a social media post, right? Shorten it up, obviously, but it's totally okay. Like I think the other thing is we think, "Oh, everybody's already read this. Everybody's already seen this." But especially when you're building your audience, you can literally repost the exact same thing with a different picture and call it a day. I think we just overthink a lot of it right now. And it's harder already. So make it easier on yourself.
So in terms of these content buckets, I want to go just a little more deeply into that,
Yeah.
because I'm sure people can kind of get there's a metaphor, an analogy. I never know the difference between the two. It's one of those anyway. It's an example of how you can do it. In these content buckets then, I mean, I'm always a big advocate, and in fact, way back, I actually wrote a book on this topic of called it the rule of thirds. So balancing content around the whole idea of personal, point, and promote. And if 1/3 of what you produce is personal, getting to know you, 1/3 is point, so showcasing other people's stuff or
Mm.
interesting things for the audience, and then 1/3 is promote. So that's the overt kind of call to action, the sales message, or that driving on to the next point in the journey. Would that work within these content buckets? Because it feels like that might fit.
For sure. Let's go through them again, and we'll give each one the personal point or promote a job. Because I have 3 goals with content as well, and I can still fit them into these. So I'll give you an analogy that I personally use all the time. I'm really obsessed with like dandelions. I have been since I was a little kid. So I use a gardening analogy, and I'm not a gardener. I could grow a great dandelion garden. So the analogy is soil, and that's the foundational content. That's like the who, what, why, when, where, the journalistic side of my business, right? Like I'm asking myself all the journalistic questions. that's where I shine also on my collaborators. Like, I'm a copywriter. I work with tons and tons of website designers. We create amazing stuff, and I don't want the launch to go unseen. When I'm collaborating with you as a podcast guest, I don't want the podcast interview to go unseen. So my part of my soil is pointing to other people that I work with and shining a light on them. So, but the other questions, the soil basically answers all the questions that your audience has, and they don't now need to go seek them out because you're answering them for them. And it answers who they are too. Like, who do you work with, right? Who am I as your ideal client? So then I like to say, we got the soil, it's nice and healthy. Now we want to add the water, which is, we're pretending we've already like planted the seeds. Okay. So we have the water, which is like the helpful content, the educational content, tips, tools, resources, however you like to share that. Like, I love giving information, but I also love saying, you have to tailor this to yourself, or this is something you could try, but this is what worked for me, that kind of thing. Like, I'm not prescriptive, I'll say, in my helpful content. Some people are, and that's okay. The next one is sunshine, and that's your personality. That's the creativity, the character, anything you feel comfortable about your personal life sharing. I say share. This is not like a post of you crying on the floor, having a vulnerable moment, unless that's what you want. But this is just the things that you love to do outside of your business. Like, I'm a big reader. I'm always sharing what I'm reading or listening to like the most random podcast you've ever you've ever found. So I'm often sharing those kind of things, and photos of your dog and hiking, whatever. Then we move on to the wind. And that is where we're really, especially when you think of dandelions, when those things take wind, right? They are just spreading dandelions left and right. And that's where I love to bring in that promotional piece. And to some extent, that's also collaborating, right? Like, collaborating, when you and I are both sharing this, it's now doubling how much it's getting shared. So immediately we're giving it kind of like an extra boost of wind. So think of the wind as that. It's just like, how am I giving people a nudge, a call to action, telling them to do the next step? And when you do that, I will say this, be very clear in what the call to action is. Like, being clear and concise in your calls to action, that's another thing I see kind of go under the radar a little bit. People are like, if you're looking for this, keep me in mind. Okay, great. Like, that's not a good call to action. I want, like, if you're looking for somebody to help you with your website copy, or let's actually take it a more specific level. If you're getting ready to redesign your website, I would love to work with you. Let's book a call and chat about your needs, right? So here's the link in the first comment, and be very like, here's the steps to do it, because it helps. People are busy. They're moving fast. They have a million things to do. Some people don't know what the link in the bio is. So just make it so easy for people to take that next step with you, rather than like having to search everywhere to track you down.
Love it. And I love the fact that there's a match here between the language I'm
Yeah.
talking and the language that you're doing. It just feels that, oh my goodness, we're both onto something here, because it kind of makes sense from whichever angle you look at it from, which is great. I'm curious about the size of these buckets then. To continue with this analogy of buckets, because I mean, obviously you're setting boundaries there with the kinds of, particularly the personal content that you talk about. So obviously, there's the dog thing, there's the layers of clothing, there's the dandelions, etc. Are there kind of, I mean, say specifically in your case, Emily, but I mean, are there kind of boundaries or a ring fence beyond which anybody shouldn't go? How do you find where that limit is on the things? Because it might be too vulnerable, or it could be too political, or it could be just not appropriate for the audience. How do you kind of set where that fence is going to be?
Everybody kind of has to decide that for themselves, but I would say a good starting place is choose like 3 to 5 fun facts about yourself that you're okay sharing. Some people I've talked to have a really high, like, I will share a lot about my life. I don't have any dark skeletons to hide, but I won't share from a place of like despair or pain or being really sad or depressed, just because that is not how I want people to come across. So if I'm having a hard day, I'm not going to vent it on the internet, right? I've kind of said, my life is mostly an open book. If I'm having a argument with my spouse, which would never happen, or my best friend, which would never happen, I wouldn't post that on the internet. So thinking, and I probably would never use it as a content example either. So thinking about like where your sort of comfort is with what you share. Some people I've talked to, they're literally only comfortable sharing, I have a cat, I like to read, I'm a writer, I like cinnamon and chocolate. That's it. So it's really what you feel comfortable in sharing. And then to make it easy, like you asked kind of what the ratio should be. I don't want you to overcomplicate it. So I would literally just say 25%. Like just do one of each you could literally do soil, water, sunshine, wind. Soil, water, sunshine, wind. Just keep on repeating that over and over and over again. I'm sure some people want to fine tune that and be like, no, it's 80-20, right? I don't get into the weeds on that, pun intended, because I don't like to overcomplicate it. So for myself, I kind of have I know on Tuesdays I share my podcast episode. I know on Thursdays I share a collaboration post. And then I have like a tip on Wednesdays, so like I sort of know my own cadence on what I'm sharing. But also if something comes up and I get a great idea, I'm just going to put it in there and I'm not going to overthink it or worry about it.
So we're kind of almost here creating a brand or brands, really, aren't we? So if you're doing this as a solopreneur, as you are, Emily, the whole thing is about, it's your personal brand. It's you that is the core of the content, the messages, and the strategy. Obviously, if somebody's working for a larger organization, it is the corporation's brand that is building there. Is it okay within content to occasionally go, as we might call it, off-piste? So do something that is really completely out of sync, just to kind of get that wake up factor? Would that work?
This is so funny you say this, because I have an email going out this Friday that is off-piste. And here's where I got the idea. I have to give her credit. So I work closely with a SEO strategist. Her name is Barb Davids of Compass Digital Strategies. And she calls it tangential, I'm not going to pronounce that word right, tangential content and stuff that your audience is interested in, but literally has nothing to do with your business. So it could be things like, I'm just going to say your audience is interested in like true crime. So you could send out an email that had nothing to do with your business and was like, here's a true crime podcast I just discovered. I'm doing one I lived in the Alps for 4 months and I have like this random story of living there. And so I did one sharing that very random story. And I did say it ties into my business, but not really. Like it is just a little bit random. So yes, I think that off-piste actually has a nice surprising effect for people. And I think that it can offer like little glimmers of connection that maybe were not there before. I wanted to really quick backtrack on the ratio and just say what I don't want to see is somebody being all promotional, all pictures of their dog, all education, all foundational, because you can see how when that happens, people start to get confused in who you are, what you're sharing. And it loses interest if you're always selling yourself, for example.
That's an interesting one. Just want to explore that one a little bit, because I've got a client currently actually who clearly will remain nameless for obvious reasons when I tell you what's going on. But basically, they like to see themselves in social media. I've got this kind of strategy that we've created with them, and it's very balanced. It's great. I mean, they've got an incredible service that they offer, and it's really incredible. In fact, I won't even mention the industry because it would be inappropriate to do so. But let's just say it's the kind of thing, if you reach a certain point in life, it's the kind of thing you would want and would need. And so they're premium brand, premium quality, really, really good. But all they really want to see in social media is themselves. That's all they want to see. They want to be seen for their family, friends, colleagues, and staff. They all want to see themselves. And I'm saying, but hold on a minute. The remit here and the key performance indicators are all about actually selling more. That is what you've told me you want to do. And yet you only want to see yourself. there's a bit of an ego thing going on here. How do you kind of counter ego when it comes into play? Because I can't be alone in this problem.
I would put on my little coaching or therapist hat and ask them a couple more questions, like, why does this feel so important to you to show up this way? Or what is your opposition around, bringing your clients into the conversation? Or what resistance do you have? I have somebody right now who I'm working with. She's constantly like underselling herself, and I it's to the point where I'm like, you're actually doing like everybody in the industry a disservice when you offer a price that low, because then someone's going to go get a quote from someone else and it's going to be like, whoa, that's like 4 times that much. So I said, like, tell me about the resistance to. I just want you to go $100 more in that proposal and see how that feels. And then they'll be like, oh my God, I can't do that. It's 100. And so I'll talk to them about like, what is the resistance with that? And that's the kind of place you have to start, because for some people, there may be a genuine discomfort in when they start to get visible, or when they start to promote themselves, or maybe they had a bad experience in the past where somebody felt salesy or shisty in a conversation. They're like, whoa, I never want to come across like that. Right. So then it's helping them say, when you're coming from a place of service, when you have something to offer the world, when you have a gift, you are literally doing people a disservice when you don't tell them about that thing. That's like having something in my hands that you really, really want. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to tell you about it. Or let's go further, like something you really, really need, right? And that would make your life so much better. And it's a solution to all your problems. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell Neil about this thing. And that's not doing a kindness to the world. So if you're creating something, especially if you're in business trying to make money, but if you're creating something, it doesn't do anybody any good for you not to share about what you're creating.
So if you are kind of sharing, and say there's something there that is either off piste or it's something so valuable that your target audience, remember we're going for one persona here, people. Emily's guided us, we have to just be focusing on the one. This is targeted stuff. Let's just say that it really takes off. It really goes, and I'm going to use the V word here. It goes
Oh boy.
viral. As and when that happens, because we've all had maybe a little micro example of that. I mean, some of us have had massive viral campaigns or viral moments, but let's just say it gets us all really, really excited. That can be a real distraction, though, can't it? Because then it makes you possibly feel now we've got to do everything like that. And that's the only thing we do, because look, we went viral there. And suddenly you get completely off of the sync. You get out of sync with those buckets, with the plan, with those themes that you've got for each month, because one thing just worked. How would you deal with that with a client?
I would say, if my 2 favorite words in the English language, it depends. So let's say that viral content was actually something that was in one of those buckets and it was really, really like aligned to your whole strategy. Then I would say, let's look at that a little bit closer and figure out why that did so well. Was it the platform? Was it the format? Was it the actual content itself? Like, maybe we changed something in the way we did the video, right? So let's really look closely at that. Was it the way I titled the episode? Was that what kind of brought people in? Was I always titling things from a negative perspective, like don't do this, and now I've changed it to a positive and suddenly I got 200 more downloads? So if it is aligned with your strategy, look closer and say, what is the cause of that? I have a friend recently who posted a video and it did go viral. It got millions of views. It has nothing to do with her business at all, at all, at all, at all. It's like about wildlife, basically. So that's not something she could really look at and say, oh, I'm going to use this for my strategy. So if it's one of those kinds of things, get excited, embrace it, and then say, now, who do I have here? And what am I creating for them? Like, have I attracted new eyes? And now, how am I going to use that information going forward? Like, who are these new eyeballs, right? Can I tie the two together at all? Could I tie this wildlife random post together with what I actually do? And if I can, let's bring these people, these newfound people, over into and invested in my content strategy that is tried and true.
Mm. It's a great answer, and I think it's just led me down this sort of stream of thought that I think there's a consistency with the way you're kind of answering the things I'm pushing in your direction. Randomly, it has to be said, and thank you for having such eloquent answers back. But is there this combination between evidence, i.e., kind of measuring and sort of like looking at outcomes, and this kind of balance with thoughtfulness? I don't want to say over planning, because we've made the point this is not about planning for planning's sake, but just being thoughtful and measuring. It feels like those two things are working hand in hand here, both to create the visibility, but also to manage the outcomes. Those two things seem to be really important.
Yeah, I like if you're talking about like clicks to a newsletter, I find those kind of metrics really, really interesting. I find social media metrics to be less interesting unless they're taking people to my website, for example. So I love the data our websites give us. I love the data our email newsletters give us. I don't always go super deep into the data that I get from social media because for most of us, for many of us, that is not the number one driver of revenue to our business. And that's another question. Like, that's a whole other beast. But basically, I think that we put a lot of weight into these pieces of content to do something for our business. And you want to know my number one favorite metric? It's like how much money is in my bank account. That is my number one favorite metric to look at because that lets me know the relationships that I'm building with people are going strong. I'm doing a great job with networking and meeting new faces. I'm having calls on my calendar that are like leading to good conversations that are growing my business. So that's the other factor of this is like content aside, what else am I doing to grow my business and my metrics and my revenue? Is it collaborating with people like you and I? Is it collaborating with somebody in your industry? Is it going to networking events? Is it creating a connection with the customers you already have and getting them to come back again and again and again? So thinking of those other things outside of your like social media views and likes can be really, really helpful because marketing is like a big pie. It has so many different pieces. It's not just social media. And I think that a lot of people say, okay, I have social media, I have an email newsletter, I have a podcast, I'm marketing. And they miss some of those other key factors.
I love you said that, Emily. I really do, because I just find myself saying those exact words time and time and time again. It is so lovely to hear somebody else say it and it's not my voice. Thank you for doing that. Really appreciate it. I'm going to ask you something here because we had to go to this conversation because, you are a content specialist. You're an expert in this area. And I'm going to use the two letters here, AI. How
Oh,
is that coming into play with the whole industry of which you're part? Because is it a threat? Is it something that kind of works hand in hand with you? Is it something that's coming to take your specialism away from you? Kind of what's your take on it as a threat or an opportunity?
I have gone so full circle with this, and I am glad. I'm a very open minded person, but when AI first made its appearance on the scene, I was A, very panicked about my own profession, and B, I hated it. I was just like, no, I was very resistant to using the tool. I was bashing it. I just did not agree with it whatsoever. Now I have come, like I said, full circle. And I do think that AI can be a really, really helpful tool in your content creation. You could plug in who your ideal client is. You could plug in how many posts you want to do every month. You could plug in how many newsletters you run and all of these four content buckets and say, can you come up with a strategy for me where I do not have to overthink my content creation? I'm not asking you to write the posts for me. Just come up with the strategy. And AI will do that for you. And that is fantastic for people who want to plan and don't want to create one themselves. The other thing it really helps me with is like ideation. So for my podcast episodes, I will get this amazing idea. I'm like, well, I don't want it just to be like my story and then two facts about this thing. I want to make this like real robust and researched and have a lot of information. So I'll say, I need more ideas within this topic, or I need an outline for this topic to kind of get me going in the direction of generating ideas. So I love it for outlining. Where I would say I also love it for learning. Like I can ask it anything and it really helps me like I'm learning about Chernobyl right now. I find that very fascinating. So it's a great tool. It is not you and it is not the person creating your content. When I see AI content, I can pretty much always pick out that it was AI content. Even if people say, "Oh, it got my voice." I'm like, "No, it did not." I'm sorry, but it loses something. Like it doesn't have the warmth, it doesn't have the personality, it doesn't have a real human character to it. And I have a friend when she writes, she actually sounds a little bit like AI, and she will use AI to warm her up. And actually, that's a great use. So, like, if you do tend towards like a very pragmatic, scientific, factual kind of approach, and you're like, I'm just not a warm person, you can use AI to help you be a little bit more warm and conversational and personal. So you can see how it goes both ways, right? Like some people it's just too cold for, and then some people can actually help to warm them up a little bit. So I love it. And you cannot copy and paste. And that I don't even actually think that's like legal to copy and paste what AI says and claim it is your own. So don't do that. But use it as a tool, use it as a big helper in your business to create content and make your job a lot easier.
So it kind of extending that on then, and I'm just going to say, yeah, couldn't agree with you more. I think there's so much sense that you're saying from the client side or from a content side of things. Listening to the way you describe that, I can see that playing out both in my business and also everybody else I'm supporting right now. It makes so much sense. So is there a kind of I guess a sort of almost like crystal ball looking into the future and seeing this whole thing kind of playing out, with a little bit of help from AI, but obviously the human content creator that might be Emily, or it could be somebody in-house who thinks, no, I am a content creator and I do this all myself. The whole kind of thing about AI driving us down to voice search. So rather than us doing searches for content by kind of long tail phrases, the whole old school SEO kind of stuff, but actually getting into verbal conversation with the AI and saying, well, again, with your Chernobyl example, they're actually talking and having conversations. And then the content that comes back is content that's been created probably by a content creator who has actually written it in a very conversational way. Do you see the future? Because from a marketing perspective, I see the future in the short to medium term being very much conversational content. Do you see that from
Agreed.
your work and the stuff that you're doing?
Completely agreed. I think at the end of the day, we're all people and we all want to feel at least like we're talking to another person on the other side. Chewy. I'm going to use Chewy, the dog. I don't know if you guys have that over there, but it's a dog food company and they do such an amazing job. Like, I know that they're not handwriting my dog a card, but they make it look handwritten. And when they respond to your emails, it is a real person. But it's so tailored to like your animal and your issue, and you just feel like an individual, and that is what people want. They want to feel seen, heard, understood. And that's why I mean, AI is smart and we are teaching it to be smarter and smarter. I don't see a world in which it just like replaces art and humans, and I hope to goodness that that is correct. But as of now, like, we need to keep on being the refiners, right, of what it gives us, and fact check. Like, it's not always 100% factual information. I had another thought on that and I think I lost it. So I'll just
There's
give you
just so
that.
much that we're unpicking here, isn't there?
I
There really
know.
is. Every time we go on to another topic, it's like, oh, yeah, but then there's this and then there's this. I've forgotten half of the questions I was going to actually ask you, I think, as we've been going through these answers. But it's
Oh,
come
I kn
back. It's come
One
back.
thing I was gonna touch on is, like, with
Mm.
the SEO, which you brought up. I think right now, it's hard because it's, like, changing so fast, and I learned a lot of the old school SEO, like, best practices, and I know that those are always at least tried and true if you're, like, starting from scratch. But I think as it evolves, we're gonna have to learn to adapt a little bit. Like, AI will still pull content that content creators are creating. I mean, that's where it's getting a lot of its stuff, right? So I don't see a world in which content creators are completely gone, because then it doesn't have anything to sort of piece together, or over time it starts to not be human at all anymore. because there are no humans creating things. So I don't think they're going to shoot themselves in the foot entirely with that. Like, that would not be smart of Google. Let's just use Google as an example. But we are going to have to adapt a little bit more to get like in a, now when you search for something on the internet, the first thing that comes up is like an AI generated response. So thinking like, now, how will I have to create content so that it gets me into that? If that feels important. I don't know enough about that yet, so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But that's where I could see like, okay, I'm going to take my SEO skills and advance them to a place where now I'm helping people to get seen in those AI searches, right?
Yeah, and I think it is that constant learning, isn't it? I think
Mhm.
we're obviously playing in this game and advising and guiding and creating stuff, both of us, in our own ways for our own customers, and yet neither of us would ever say, "Yeah, we've got this," because it is that constant journey, isn't it? Which makes it, one, a challenge, but also two, very exciting, because you've got an opportunity here to really forge forward and actually be at the front of the wave. And I think what we're encouraging here is everybody to continue to research, continue to listen, continue to engage with people who are excited and passionate about it, because obviously content itself it's the fuel for any kind of marketing or communications. It's never going to go away. It's always there, and staying at the forefront of it is just so exciting. I'd love to connect people with you, Emily. If people have sort of heard this and think, "Oh, Emily speaks some real sense, and I need to kind of see what she's doing, and I need to follow her on socials and all that kind of stuff," how can people connect with you?
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. So I would just say you're already listening to a podcast, and it'd be a quick jump over to my podcast, which is Content with Character. And you can also find me at emilyaborn.com. I am the only Emily Aborn, so just type that into Google and you'll find everything you need to know. So thank you. And this was such a riveting conversation about content, which is a conversation in and of itself. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emily. And everybody listening to this, you see what Emily just did there? This is content visibility, because Emily is the only Emily Aborn. I'm just going to leave that
Well,
thought with you. Just going to leave that thought with you. What have you got, listeners and watchers? What have you got that is the only one? Because Emily Aborn,
ooh,
there's only one.
I
There's a
love
thought
that.
to leave you with.
I was gonna say they probably can't change their name, but I love that. What are you the only one of?
There's content visibility. Emily, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.